you say
Let's
that?
go.
Start.
It's recording.
Is it recording?
Wait, I'm gonna make sure.
Bruh!
Oh God.
Is it powers on and stops working? Are you sure you have enough memory, bro?
Yeah, I am sure. Yeah.
Let's talk to this twice.
Okay.
Okay, you want me to? Should I start?
We shouldn't just go to the store, buy a
Should I
selfie
start
stick,
right
and
now?
just walk around the whole thing and do this?
Start. Okay, I'll start.
So this one time
Who's
at
timing?
bank
Shut
camp.
up.
4 minutes. Okay.
Go.
Go. Okay. Harm 1. Name. Practices that do not reflect the desires of the population. Claim. The Electoral College is undemocratic. Evidence. According to an article by the New York Times in 2016, Donald Trump was elected president with 306 electors and almost 63 million votes. 63 million votes, about 2.9 million votes less than Hillary Clinton, according to Jane Bowie in an article. Warrant. If the candidate is elected without having the majority of the votes, it does not represent what is needed by the population, and the president will not fulfill the necessities of the country. Impact. If the president does not represent the majority of the people, then there is no way the country will improve, for there is no consideration of the public, which is what the country is made of. Harm 2. Contingent elections. Name. Claim. The Electoral College violates separation of powers. Evidence. In an article by Dr. Annie Sisman, 2018, an interesting fact is mentioned. In the case of contingent elections, the population as a whole is omitted from the election, and the Congress selects the president. Moreover, Barbara Boxer, former U.S. Senator for California, mentions in an article in the Congressional Digest in 2017, this doesn't make sense. This is an outdated system that does not reflect democracy, and it violates the principle of one person, one vote. Every single American, regardless of what state they live in, should be guaranteed that their individual vote matters. Warrant. Because the legislative branch selects the executive, then there is a violation of the principle that there should be a separation of powers, which is unconstitutional. Impact. This is harmful to the country because it increases corruption, since the elections are managed only by the government. Solvency. 1. Removing the Electoral College will make all votes count and prevent candidates to win election based off the electoral votes, just as President Trump did. Evidence. According to David C. Beckwith of Encyclopedia Britannica, it informs us that despite Hillary Clinton, the Democratic candidate, won the popular vote, Donald Trump ended up winning. Warrant. No electoral college means no Trump-like winnings and equal vote value for each state and voter. Significance. We do not want someone that we or the majority of the states do not want in office to be elected. And the advantage. Individual voting. No electoral college means every vote counts. Evidence. According to Stanford Magazine, our votes would count the same wherever they were cast. Warrant. If every vote counted, candidate would care more about the people themselves, and therefore the people's needs would be better heard and taken care of. Advantage 2. Security. The voters know that their decision will count. Since the swing states are no longer the ones that hold the most power, each votes count equally the same. And the significance. The population will suffer if its decision is not listened. I'm done.
All right, cross-examination,
Yep.
2 minutes.
Okay.
Do you know how likely it is that an election goes to the House?
The election will go to the House based on the voters, and normally if over half, like 51 at least, pass, then they will pass.
Do you know when the last time an election went to the House? That's fine.
No, I'm afraid I do not.
All right, so what you were suggesting was that the United States federal government is a democracy. However, it's technically a fixed economy, so how does that make your source valid?
My sources were dated based on the results and the data at the time.
But how does it make it valid?
It was reported from each of the states counted together.
But anyway. All right. Negative 5 minutes. According to ThoughtCo, the Electoral College helps give rural states with lower population an equal vote. If the popular vote alone decided elections, the presidential candidates would rarely visit those states or consider the need of rural residents in their policy platforms. This helps to ensure the president addresses the need of the entire country. Therefore, the Electoral College should not be abolished by the United States federal government and should be kept instead. Disadvantage number 1, tyranny of the majority. If the Electoral College was amended or removed and replaced with NPV, or National Popular Votes, then voters would be properly represented with one person, one vote for their candidate. Link. If the Electoral College was replaced with popularity votes with one person, one vote, then presidential candidates can ignore small states such as Rhode Island and others and focus only on states with large populations such as New York and California. Evidence. According to Wikipedia, the tyranny of majority, or tyranny of the masses, is an inherent weakness of the majority rule in which the majority of an electorate can and does place its own interests above and at the expense of those in the minority. According to Barbara S. Gamble's study regarding majority voting, the majority will vote in the interests of the majority and disregard the minority voters who have significant disadvantages with the MPV rule, one person, one vote. Disadvantage number 2, getting rid of the Electoral College is not as simple as it may sound. Claim, according to National Affairs, simply doing away with the existing process without putting a new one on its place could create the biggest political crisis in American history since the Civil War. According to the slate, there is pressure for runoff elections when no one candidate wins majority of the votes cast. The pressures that would greatly complicate the presidential election process is reduced by the Electoral College, which is invariably produces a clean winner. The impact. If the president does not represent the majority of the people, there is no way the country will improve, for there is no consideration of the public, which is what the country is actually made out of. Counter contention number 1. Minorities would not have a say in what goes on in the country, only the majority will. If the Electoral College eliminated these kinds of problems could present in all elections, not just presidential, but state and county. Significance. This would not only affect the decision of the population, but also harm the country with unsuitable presidents that will not consider certain groups of people. Counter contention 2. Lack of management. Electoral College ensures the security of the elections. If the elections were managed by the government only, there would be a problem of corruption, since there would not be a sole institution controlling the elections. If the corruption of elections would be compromised without populations even knowing that there was. Counter contention 3. According to the article by the Supreme Court debate in 2017, one of the characteristics of Electoral College is to promote a two-party system for avoiding and having a minimum votes for the most voted parties. Wards. The United States focuses on a two-party system. The United States focuses on a two-party system because of the structure of the Electoral College. That doesn't mean other political parties can get involved in the election. It just means more candidates that are elected will be either a Republican or a Democrat. The only independent candidate to be elected president in United States history was George Washington. The last third-party candidate to win a state's electoral votes was George Wallace in 1968. This means that there is a reasonable certainty as to how the government will run, no matter which majority party in the U.S. winds up with the White House. The significance? This would cause chaos and confusion to the voters because of the complexity of new political parties that might show up. Second cross-examination, 2 minutes.
Well, okay, so I understand that there is there is the tyranny of the majority, but with the electoral college, is it not possible that a minority can overtake states with significantly more population through the electoral college? I understand the concept of tyranny of the majority, but it's also possible for it to easily turn around with the minority dictating everything and following the rules of the electoral college. The majority would also have to abide by those rules.
So what's the question? You're just stating something.
So how do you know that so if the tyranny of the majority is a problem, then is it not possible that the minority can overtake it and cause just as much damage?
No, because with the electoral college in place, it allows states with lower populations to interact and have a fair fighting ground with higher states such as California. For example, Rhode Island has about, I think, 2 electoral votes every presidential election, while California, I think it's like 12 or 13. Point is, it's a lot more. But even though it's 13 or 2, each electoral vote matters. So going to each individual state will make a difference, despite how many people live in those states. It proves that not only are you caring about the individual needs of each citizen or person who is voting, but it proves that each section or region of the country is in support of a certain action or a certain person, candidate.
Oh, so okay, I got it, thank you.
So I would also like to ask, when you say that elections are compromised because of the corruption that might result from eliminating the electoral college, do you have any proofs that there is corruption inside of the government of the United States of America?
However, even though we can't actually technically determine whether there's corruption or not in the actual government, through the actual voting system, there's something called butterfly votes, where a person can vote in one state and go to another state and vote again, which is, yes, technically an error with the voting system. However, it is still connected to the government. So there is a form of corruption through the popular vote. That's why with the electoral vote, even though we as citizens vote in a certain state, we may actually not make a difference.
But then wouldn't you say that this corruption is linked to the individual, not to the government? You're saying that the individual would vote twice, not the government. The government is not engaging in corruption.
The government is engaging in corruption because of the voting system. The voting system is linked to the government, which is linked to the executive branch of the 3 branches of government. Therefore, it is corrupt. There is possible corruption. As for the electoral voters, in case you were wondering that, the electoral voters are chosen at random. No one actually knows how many electoral voters there are for each state, and it's not, even though it may be up to, in the long run, up to them to actually make the decision whether they vote for one candidate over another, they have to consider popular vote as well.
I would also like to ask, so you're supposing that in the year that we live today, we would also use
like 4 minutes.
Yikes.
That was not long.
My bad.
Gian, 4 minutes? 5 minutes.
Okay, so you say that the electoral college provides security and stability. However, an article by Ron Elvin in NPR News in 2018 suggested the problem during the 2000 elections in Florida was a result of merely the context where the elections were held. The recount happened because of the negligence of the state of Florida. Citing the article, disputes erupted over the accuracy and reliability of the election technology in the state, with confusion over butterfly ballots and punch cards voting machines. However, the article concludes by stating that this situation is unlikely to happen due to the new technologies used for elections. The states no longer relied on outdated machines or processes. Therefore, this is another reason why the Electoral College is obsolete and harms our elections and future. Also, you mentioned that getting rid of the Electoral College is not as simple as it may sound. However, this is not what the government and population thinks today. According to Jane Bowie, in an article in 2016 from the New York Times, Electoral College is a threat to our democracy. She mentions in this article that electoral votes do not represent the country, and that for the country to succeed, there should be there should only exist a popular vote. Moreover, as we just mentioned, Barbara Boxer, former U.S. Senator from California, mentions in an article in the Congressional Digest in 2017 that the Electoral College doesn't make sense. This is an outdated system and does not reflect democracy, and it violates the principle of one person, one vote. Also, when you say that everyone's vote will count, the problem is that minorities would not have a say in if the electoral college stays. According to Carl Hudson in an article from the New York in 2017, the minorities do not have say because of the winner takes all rule. Minorities in a country are usually ignored because they do not make a difference in elections. So if the electoral college is eliminated, the minorities would finally have a say in, since the candidate would have to listen to them also. This was all stated by Carl Hudson in this article. Also, you said that the electoral college ensures that everyone is considered. Nevertheless, the electoral college means biased candidate. Due to the electoral college system, the candidates need to statistically assess what states to visit for their campaign. In an article by David Stromberg in 2008 from the American Economic Review asserts that after having examined previous elections, candidates see themselves preferring other states due to its importance. Hence, if the swing states are so decisive to the success of the candidates will end up neglecting some states. This means that the population is not able to make a right decision because of the inviability of a campaign in smaller states.
Five minutes, negative.
You say that the Electoral College is not democratic, but according to ushistory.org, nowhere is the word democracy mentioned in the Declaration of Independence or the U.S. Constitution. According to an article in the usconstitution.net, last bona fide hours of 2010, the United States is a federal republic and a constitutional representative of democracy. This means that all eligible citizens vote for representatives to pass laws for them and represent their state. With the choosing of representatives in the people's hands, how is there a claim that the needs of the U.S. citizens will not be met? The people have the ability to choose their representatives, so how is it that your claim that there is no consideration of the public? You stated that the possibility of a contingent election means the election is ruled by the government. According to history.house.gov, in the case of an electoral college deadlock, or if no candidate receives the majority of votes, a contingent election is held. The election of the president goes to the House of Representatives. Each state delegation casts one vote for one of the top three contenders to determine a winner. Out of 58 presidential elections that we have had, only 2 have been decided in the House. Those are the elections of 1800 and 1824. This means it's been almost 200 years since the House has even chosen the president, and proves it is very unlikely that a contingent election will happen. You also claimed that by removing the Electoral College, it will make it so that all votes count and will prevent the election of a candidate who has not won the majority vote, but only the electoral vote. Though in an article by the San Diego Union Tribune, written by James W. Ingram, a professor at San Diego State University, who has a PhD in politics and helped reform the mayoral systems of LA and San Diego, had the founders required presidents to gain a majority of the popular vote rather than of the Electoral College, over 30% of our presidential elections would have been decided by the U.S. House. People who argue against the Electoral College say that it takes the control out of the people's hands, though this proves that it is a much more suited option for keeping the control in the people's hands. According to a U.S. News article written 2012 by Trent England, the Vice President of Policy at the Freedom Foundation, the Electoral College turns our national presidential contest into 51 smaller elections. It allows control over the election process to remain at the state level and keeps presidential appointees in Washington, D.C. from running the presidential elections. And that is why I vote to keep the Electoral College in place. How long is it?
So what the affirmative side is saying is that they should remove the electoral college in place of having a popular vote election. However, there are things that prove that we should keep electoral college, such as the tyranny of the majority, which is that having the electoral college removed would mean that one person, one vote. However, it creates a way where candidates only focus on the higher populations. Another thing is it's simply not as simple to get rid of as it may sound because of the state government and also the federal government aspect.
Okay, the electoral college system, the electoral college is an outdated system for the representation. There should be a one vote from one person. And while I do understand the concern of corruption and gaming and what I consider gaming the system, vote one place and vote and move to another state to vote, there should be proper. While I'm aware of that, there should also be a proper security and system to make sure that no one tries to gain more than one vote unfairly. The Electoral College was created for a long time ago. I think we have reached a point where we can create security and also create measurements. And even if the Electoral College system stays, we should find a way to change it so that we can properly represent. That's it. Okay, that's it.
For ourselves and somebody else does.
Oh shit! I hope that video was recording.
We did something wrong.
What?
You were supposed to close it.
Did close it.
No, the
Oh,
affirmative
like-
closes it.
No.
Affirmative.
The affirmative. I was supposed to finish it off. Yeah.
That's what you just did.